On our wedding anniversary, my vindictive mother-in-law unexpectedly accused me of stealing her $20,000 gold watch. Right in front of everyone, she yelled, "You're the thief!" My husband immediately halted the celebration and demanded that I give the watch back. When I explained that I hadn't taken it, he lost control and struck me so hard on the nose that I collapsed and hurt myself. But then something happened that no one saw coming. I'm Arya Bennett, 29 years old. What was meant to be a night celebrating love and commitment quickly turned into the most humiliating evening of my life. For our first anniversary, I had envisioned an evening full of joy, laughter, and all the beauty that love brings. Instead, everything unraveled. We were hosting a lavish party at my home in Willowdale, a cozy town where I grew up. I had inherited the house from my parents. It was a repository of my most cherished memories. Caleb, my husband, 31, was once a man I believed was kind, patient, and loyal, a real estate consultant, someone I thought would be with me forever. That night, our house was adorned beautifully. Shimmering lights danced along the walls, soft music set a gentle background, and laughter filled every corner. Friends, colleagues, and extended family gathered in the dining hall, clinking glasses and sharing toasts. Even Marilyn, Caleb's mother, was there. Dressed in her signature pearls and exuding an expensive perfume, she reminded everyone of her high status. A retired fashion boutique owner known for her elegance and frosty attitude, her presence loomed large. At first, the night seemed perfect. However, as the evening went on, I noticed Marilyn's smile grow sharper and more insincere. Her eyes continuously tracked me, and her conversations were laced with subtle barbs. I tried to brush it off, reminding myself this night was about celebrating our love. Then, in a moment etched in my memory, Marilyn stood up during dinner, tapped her glass with her ring, and demanded everyone's attention. "I have something important to say," she declared in a steady yet heavy tone. As everyone turned their gaze toward her, Caleb looked confused. I too was bewildered as she raised her bare wrist, revealing a faint tan line where her luxurious gold watch once rested. "My watch," she said slowly. "A family heirloom worth thousands is missing. And the last person seen near my room was Arya." My heart sank. I stuttered, "No, I haven't been anywhere near it." But Marilyn's cool composure shattered as she snapped, "Don't lie. You've always envied our lifestyle. Admit it, you stole it." The room went silent as all eyes bore into me. I pleaded for support from Caleb, hoping he'd step in, but instead he yelled, "Arya, if you took it, return it. Don't make this mess worse. I didn't take anything." I burst into tears, asking, "How can you believe this?" Before I could say anything more, he struck my face. Shocked gasps filled the room as I recoiled, clutching my cheek, utterly humiliated. Caleb then coldly announced, "I'm calling the police." Minutes later, I was dragged out of my own home in handcuffs, my face throbbing with pain, and my spirit shattered by betrayal. Marilyn smiled, Caleb stood defiant, and the guests I had welcomed into my home looked away. But they didn't know that I wasn't finished yet. I would return, and I wouldn't be empty-handed. The ride in the back of the police car felt surreal. My hands were securely cuffed, my cheeks still burned from the slap, and my vision blurred by tears. I had never felt so degraded and discarded. The flashing red and blue lights bounced off the windows, a relentless reminder that my world, everything I had once believed in, was crumbling. At the station, I was processed like a criminal. My fingerprints were taken, mugshots snapped, and officers, already convinced of my guilt, interrogated me in a cold, dim room under harsh fluorescent lights. "Did you steal the watch? Have you had conflicts with your mother-in-law before? Were you near her room during the party?" they asked. I repeated over and over, "No, I didn't take anything. I have no idea where the watch is." But they wouldn't believe me. I could hear the suspicion in their voices and see it in their eyes. They thought I was just another envious woman craving a taste of luxury. One officer even sighed when I asked for water. They scoured my purse, clothes, even my shoes, finding nothing because there really was nothing to find. After hours, they released me, murmuring there wasn't enough evidence. Yet, the damage was irreversible. My reputation, dignity, and sense of belonging had been obliterated. At 4 a.m. I stepped out of that station alone, standing under the cold streetlights of Willowdale, clutching my coat as I had no idea where to go. I couldn't return to my home, the house filled with memories that Caleb and his mother had claimed as their own. Somehow, they had manipulated the paperwork during our marriage, twisting the law so that I no longer recognized my rights. I had trusted them and believed that love would protect me. I eventually found a cheap motel on the edge of town. It reeked of bleach and dust, but I didn't mind. I collapsed onto the worn-out bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, and for the first time that night, I let myself completely break down. My phone buzzed with messages and missed calls from friends, distant relatives, and neighbors. None of them asked if I was okay. All they wanted was to hear gossip wrapped in fake concern. I ignored them. I was completely drained emotionally, physically, mentally. And beneath that exhaustion, something else began to rise. Rage. They had taken everything from me, but I wasn't going to let them win. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at my reflection in a cracked mirror. My face was pale, my eyes swollen, and the red mark from Caleb's slap still burned on my cheek. I barely recognized the woman staring back, but beneath the bruises and pain, I felt a transformation. I wasn't just broken, I was furious. I had trusted Caleb, welcomed his mother into my life, and bent over backward to keep the peace, to be the good wife and the kind daughter-in-law. And what did I receive in return? Public humiliation, betrayal, and homelessness. Then, as if fate wanted to taunt me further, I received an eviction notice. I stared at the document in disbelief. The house my parents had left me was now legally under Caleb's name. Using our marriage, he quietly transferred ownership, exploiting my trust and love like a predator. I crumpled the notice in my hands. That was my breaking point. The Arya who once strove for peace, who always looked for the good in everyone, was gone. A new Arya was emerging, one that refused to be the victim. With what little strength I had left, I went back to the police station, not as a suspect this time, but as someone ready to fight back. I requested to speak with someone about filing a formal complaint. The officer behind the desk gave me a tired, dismissive look, assuming it was just a domestic squabble. "It's probably a misunderstanding," he said as he turned back to his computer. I replied firmly, "No, this is fraud, theft and abuse, and I have proof." That's when I met Detective Naomi Clark, a sharp-eyed, calm woman in her early 40s. She truly listened as I recounted everything, from Marilyn's calculated barbs and Caleb's sudden coldness, from the false accusation at the party to the slap, the arrest, the forged paperwork, and the stolen house. I admitted, voice trembling, "They've taken everything from me." Naomi didn't dismiss me. Instead, she said quietly, "Clever people always leave traces. We'll find them." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Detective Naomi Clark wasted no time. The very next morning, she called me in for a formal statement. Sitting across from her in a small, quiet office, with a notepad in hand and still shaking, I recounted every detail: dates, conversations, financial records, and even seemingly minor moments that now revealed a bigger plan. When I mentioned that Caleb's name appeared on the house deed shortly after our wedding, she leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Do you still have the original paperwork?" I nodded. "Yes, I have my parents' will, the deed, the bank documents. I kept them all secure in a fireproof lockbox." "Where is that lockbox now?" she asked. I hesitated. "It was in our bedroom closet, and Caleb must have taken it." Naomi scribbled a note and promised they'd track it down. The following days crawled by as Naomi assigned a small team to gather evidence, reviewing my financial records, property transfers, and even Caleb's banking activity. I handed over every text, email, and receipt I had. Meanwhile, I struggled to regain some semblance of stability while staying in motel room 112, a tiny refuge from the storm. The motel manager, Elsie, a kind woman in her 60s with silver curls and a raspy voice from years of smoking, showed me unexpected kindness. Every morning, she'd bring coffee without me asking, and on nights when I hadn't eaten, she'd leave a warm meal by my door. "You don't owe them your tears, sweet girl," she told me one evening as we sat on a small bench outside my door. "What they did isn't love, it's poison." Her words held me together when I felt utterly lost. 2 weeks into the investigation, Detective Naomi called me back with an excitement in her voice that I hadn't heard in ages. "Arya," she said as I sat down, "we found something." She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were records showing that Caleb had opened a secret trust account under his own name just weeks after our wedding. Thousands of dollars, money from my inheritance, had been funneled into that account over time, hidden among routine expenses like home renovations, insurance, and maintenance. Everything was funneled directly to him. I stared down at the papers as my stomach twisted with betrayal. The man I trusted, the one I loved, had been stealing from me in plain sight. Naomi's gaze was steady. "This is solid evidence," she said. "It proves this wasn't mere negligence, he was in on it. And we're looking further into Marilyn's role. I suspect she orchestrated much of this." I nodded slowly, anger burning under my ribs. "I want to stop them from selling the house. Can we do that?" Naomi offered a small, confident smile. "Already in progress. We filed an emergency injunction. They can't touch the property until we finish this case." That was our first real victory, though I knew the battle was far from over. I had just begun reclaiming my life. As the investigation advanced, so did my resolve. Each morning I woke up, poured a cup of motel coffee, and repeated to myself, "They will not win." Detective Naomi Clark kept me updated at every stage. Her approach methodical, patient, and determined. A few days after freezing the house sale, she called me in again, her tone now heavy with significance. "Arya," she said, sliding a printed email across the desk, "we've hit a jackpot." I leaned in to read it. My heart sank as I saw the subject line. Steps to secure full ownership. It was an email from Marilyn, addressed to Caleb just weeks before our anniversary. In it, she outlined how to manipulate me into transferring assets, what lies to tell, even how to use the party as a distraction if things went awry. "Get her drunk if you have to, then have her sign the paperwork while she's emotional," it read. I was stunned. All those little moments I dismissed as offhand comments, Caleb's sudden insistence on updating our joint accounts, and the pressure to trust without question had all been part of a calculated plan. This wasn't just fraud. It was a premeditated betrayal executed with cold precision. Naomi leaned back and observed me processing the enormity of it all. "This goes far beyond fraud. It's calculated emotional abuse. He's been coached every step of the way," she explained softly. Tears welled up as the weight of betrayal hit me again, but I also felt something else, a burning determination to reclaim control of my life. Welling back my emotions, I refused to let a single tear fall. I wasn't about to give Marilyn even that satisfaction. "Can we use this in court?" I asked softly. "Absolutely," Naomi replied. "This is damning. The district attorney is preparing formal charges against them both. We're going to get your house back, your money, and clear your name." For the first time, I believed her. In the weeks that followed, I began to feel like myself again. Not the naive woman stuck in a broken marriage, but a survivor. I helped Naomi and her team by organizing every document I could salvage, jotting down every detail of past conversations that once seemed insignificant, but now formed a complete picture of manipulation and greed. Elsie, the motel manager, became like family during that time. One afternoon, she even snapped a photo of me and pinned it on the bulletin board behind the front desk, saying proudly, "Strongest woman I know." I managed a tearful smile. Not because I was broken, but because someone finally recognized my true self. That evening, as dusk settled outside room 112, Naomi called again. "Arya," she said in a serious tone, "they tried to list the house under a fake name. Marilyn used a shell identity and hired a private agent to skirt the injunction. If we hadn't caught it in time, the property could have been sold offshore." My blood turned to ice. "They're desperate and dangerous," I murmured. "But don't worry," Naomi reassured me. "We've charged them with attempted fraud, obstruction, and identity falsification. With the theft and abuse charges, this case is airtight." I sat in silence as her words sank in. "Are you ready to take them to court?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Yes. I've never been more ready." The day of the trial came sooner than expected. I stood outside the Willowdale County Courthouse in a simple navy suit, my heart pounding like a drum. The sky was overcast and a cool breeze stirred the trees lining the steps. It felt like the calm before a storm that I was prepared to face. Detective Naomi Clark greeted me at the door with a confident nod and a warm smile. "You're going to do great," she said. "Remember, you're not on trial here, they are." Inside, the courtroom was hushed, the soft murmur of lawyers and shuffling papers filled the air, but to me it all seemed distant. My eyes eventually met those of Caleb and Marilyn, sitting together at the defense table. Marilyn, ever composed in her tailored black dress with pearls, no longer smiled. Caleb, meanwhile, looked pale and uneasy, fidgeting with his cufflinks and avoiding my gaze. Taking a deep breath, I sat with Naomi and the district attorney Rachel Marks, a fierce, confident woman with an iron will and a brilliant legal mind. With a nod and a whispered, "Let's bring them down," she began the trial. Rachel launched her opening statement. "This case isn't about a misunderstanding. It's about manipulation, betrayal, and premeditated theft. Arya Bennett wasn't just emotionally abused. She was targeted, stripped of her rightful inheritance by those she trusted." I watched as the jury leaned in, some even casting suspicious glances toward Caleb and Marilyn. Over the next several days, Rachel presented damning financial records, fraudulent property transfer documents, and email communications between Marilyn and Caleb. Naomi testified with unwavering confidence, detailing how Marilyn had orchestrated the entire scheme, how Caleb blindly followed her, and how I'd been set up as the villain to hide their tracks. Then it was my turn. I stood before the court, my voice trembling at first but gaining strength as I spoke. I loved Caleb, I trusted Marilyn, I gave them everything. My heart, my home, my loyalty. And in return they humiliated me, stole from me, and tried to destroy my life. I paused, locking eyes with the jury. I refused to be silent any longer. I'm here not just for myself, but for anyone who's ever been manipulated into thinking they were the problem. I wasn't the problem, they were. When I left the witness stand, the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. One of the trial's unforgettable moments came during cross-examination. Rachel leaned forward, addressing Marilyn coolly. Mrs. Langston, can you explain why you accused Arya of stealing your watch when no physical evidence was ever found? Marilyn hesitated. I believe she had taken it. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Believed? Or was it just a convenient excuse for seizing control of her home and assets? Silence. Marilyn began, but no words followed. The courtroom fell still. The jury had seen enough. The final day of the trial felt like the closing chapter of an unwanted book. A chapter one had to finish. When the jury returned and the foreperson began reading, every breath in the room seemed to hang in suspense. I sat upright, hands clenched tight. Finally, the foreperson unfolded the papers. For charges of fraud, theft, and emotional abuse, we find the defendants Caleb Langston and Marilyn Langston guilty on all counts. I closed my eyes as the word guilty echoed through the room. A flood of relief, validation, and justice rushing in. Tears welled up, but now they were tears of triumph. The judge then declared, based on overwhelming evidence and the jury's unanimous decision, this court sentences Caleb Langston to 9 years in state prison and Marilyn Langston to 11 years for conspiracy, financial fraud, identity falsification, and emotional abuse. Their assets are frozen, and the house will be returned to Arya Bennett immediately. Every penny stolen from her inheritance is to be repaid with interest. Caleb looked as though he'd aged a decade in those moments, trembling as the bailiffs approached, while Marilyn, stripped of all pretense, sat silently, a bitter, broken shadow of herself. As they were led away, I didn't look back. Naomi leaned in and whispered, "They got what they deserved." I managed to nod through my tears. "Thanks to you." "No," she said gently, "thanks to you. You never gave up." Walking out of the courthouse felt like a mountain had been lifted from my chest. The skies over Willowdale shone brighter than they had in weeks, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I breathed easily. Justice had been served, but my journey was far from over. In the days that followed, I reclaimed my home. My parents' beloved house returned to me. Standing in front of it with keys in hand, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. The lawn was overgrown, the flower beds dull. Yet every creak of the floorboards and crack in the paint carried memories that I thought were lost forever. Slowly, I walked through each room and touched the walls, not in sorrow but in the promise of new beginnings. The ornate furniture was gone, and Caleb's upgrades had been stripped away, leaving the house quiet and empty, but truly mine again. I began to redecorate, not to erase the past, but to breathe new life into it. I painted the walls in soft earth tones, replaced heavy curtains with warm linens, and filled every corner with cherished belongings. Books, plants, and photographs of my parents. Each brushstroke was a step toward healing. I even hired a new financial advisor to help sort out what was left of my inheritance. Thanks to the court order, every penny stolen was slowly being returned, my savings restored, and my accounts unfrozen. Yet, beyond the money, I reclaimed my independence. One afternoon, Elsie, the ever-kind motel manager who treated me like family, came over for tea. We sat in the garden beneath an old oak tree, watching the wind dance among the leaves. "You did it, honey," she said with familiar warmth. "You took your life back." I squeezed her hand gently. "I never could have done it without you and Naomi." She shook her head. "You did the hard part. You survived them and came out stronger." She was right. I was not the same woman who had once left that house in handcuffs, silenced by humiliation and abuse. I was someone new. Months passed and gradually life began to feel normal again. Not the old normal, but a better version that I was building from the ground up. I always had a passion for interior styling, a gift inherited from my mother, so I turned it into a profession. I started a small freelance home decor business, offering personalized makeovers and budget-friendly design plans. At first, I worked on tiny projects helping friends and local clients, but word spread quickly. By the end of the first month, I had 5 active clients and a waiting list. Work became my therapy, a reminder that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Detective Naomi Clark often called to check on me. "I just want to see how you're holding up," she'd say, her voice carrying pride as if rooting for me like an older sister. One day I thanked her once more. "You didn't just help me win a case," I told her. "You helped me find myself again." She chuckled softly. "You did that on your own. I merely handed you the flashlight." The emotional healing was gradual. Some nights I'd wake drenched in sweat, haunted by flashes of Caleb's betrayal and the memory of Marilyn's forced smirk. But as time went on, those shadows began to fade, replaced by quiet mornings in my garden, laughter-filled dinners with Elsie, and the joy of watching a client's face light up after a project was finished. One afternoon, while organizing the attic, I discovered an old photo tucked away in a dusty box. It was from my honeymoon with Caleb. We were smiling, arms wrapped around one another, blissfully unaware of the chaos ahead. I stared at the photo for a long moment and then, without hesitation, tore it in half. There was no sadness in that act, only peace. That chapter was over for good. About 6 months after the trial, one evening, I stood in the backyard of my reclaimed home, surrounded by people who had become my chosen family. The warm Willowdale breeze rustled through the trees, and soft music floated from a speaker set up on the patio. Simple paper lanterns swayed overhead, casting a gentle golden glow over the garden. It wasn't extravagant, but it was real, and it was mine. I had invited only a few, Elsie and her husband Harold, a couple of my new design clients who had become close friends, and Detective Naomi Clark, who arrived in jeans and a cardigan, holding a bottle of sparkling cider and a rare, genuine smile. "You've done something beautiful here," Naomi remarked as she took in the scene. I brushed a curl behind my ear and replied, "Not just the house, my life." As the evening wore on, laughter bubbled around us. People danced, shared stories, and toasted to new beginnings. I stood at the edge of it all, savoring every moment. Just 6 months earlier, I'd been dragged out of that same house in handcuffs, shamed and abandoned. Now I stood tall, proud, and surrounded by love. Later that night, after the guests had left and the stars blanketed the sky, I sat alone on the back steps, sipping the last of my cider. I looked up and whispered, "Thank you, Mom and Dad. I kept the house, I kept my name, and I'm finally okay." It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I said, "I do" to Caleb, but it was so much better. I had discovered inner strength and rebuilt everything they tried to destroy, all on my own terms. This is my story. Although the chapter with Caleb and Marilyn has closed, the rest of the book is still being written by me. I am Arya Bennett and I am free. Thank you for watching Arya's powerful journey of courage and justice. If her story inspires you, please like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this.